The combat training instructor welcomes all recruits in the U.S. Marine Corps. He claims that there are neither black nor white, all the same color, green. Subaran understands that the entry into the ranks of the Marine Corps was a bad decision. Recruits are distributed to the Pendleton Marine Corps. The senior officer attaches Swaffin to the second company so that he pulls up these Podolbayev. The platoon meets the beginner with a rite, which involves the branding of each infantryman with a red, hot logo of the Marine Corps. With great difficulty, they manage to tie Smorford, and from emotional overload, he loses consciousness. Having come to his senses, Suford discovers that there is no stigma. Troy says that they just scared him, replacing the stigma with a cold. Swarm still regrets his decision to join the ranks of the U.S. Marine Corps. Therefore, he imitates poisoning, flooding the laxative, and recalls his civilian life. His father served in Vietnam and was a rather harsh parent who almost did not participate in the upbringing of his son. The sister suffered from a mental illness, and the mother was in constant depression. The only ray of light in his life was Christina, his girlfriend, who promised to wait for him at all costs. However, his solitude is interrupted by the senior sergeant of the Marine Corps. He heard that for a draw with a stigma, 5 infantrymen had to sweat pretty much to lay Smorfad. So your arms are in your feet, and get well. You have a chance to get into the Scout Snipers, he says. Sykes offers Sufor the opportunity to join the shelf of sniper intelligence. However, Sunford is not interested and tries to change the subject. Then Sykes goes on a trick and asks if he can play on some musical instrument. Smorford, delighted with the opportunity to avoid unnecessary training, reports that he played on the mountain at school. Six advises him to come to the audition. The next morning, Smorford comes to audition. Private Swarmo came to play on the mountain, he declares, putting himself on the laughingstock in front of the platoon of snipers. Then Sykes interrupts him and says that there is no place for tears. He begins to talk about how prestigious to be a sniper intelligence officer. This is considered the most prestigious work in the Marine Corps. After that, Suford proudly informs the sergeant that he wants to stay. Hard preparation of recruits begins. Over time, the thought of the war penetrates the head of Smorford, and he finds his calling in this matter. He begins to dream of seeing a cloud of blood from his shots. Once, on the exercises, a tragedy occurs. One of the employees passed the nerves while crawling under the barbed wire under fire from a machine gun. The newborn gets up and gets a bullet in the head. Sunford finishes the training of a sniper Paget along with 7 other fighters. Six appoints him a shooter, and Troy, the gunner. Troy envies Swarms because he also wanted to be a shooter. Then Sykes teaches them to make an oath of the shooter. This happens at the moment when Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait and the United States announces a conflict. On the same day, Marine infantrymen watch a film about the war in Vietnam. Everyone is inspired by what they saw and crave spectacles. But the session is suddenly interrupted, and the announcer reports that the soldiers urgently appear at the disposal of the company. All infantrymen are madly glad that they finally bring them to apply their skills in business. The United States begins the deployment of troops for the Operation Shield in the Desert. Lieutenant Colonel Kuczynski conducts instructing Marine infantry and reports that Iraqis use poisoning gas. He shows a photo of an Iranian child who suffered from this gas, which is a little depressing the fighters. The Lieutenant Colonel adds that the murder of the Iraqis is not their mission. They are here to protect the oil towers of Saudi Arabia. On the way to his camp, Kruger demonstrates his ability to think critically. He is the most smart of them. The second platoon is justified in a new camp. Sword admires a photograph of his girlfriend. Fowler approaches him and notes that Christina is very attractive, almost like Ferrari. Cortez reassures the heated warriors with a photograph of his pregnant wife. Six bursts into the tent and commands the fighters to equip in chemical protection. Everyday routine begins. The construction 6 times a day, after which they are poured with water, patrol the desert, urinate on command, throw grenades into the void, wander in imaginary minefields, shoot nowhere, and poured again with water. After these useless classes, they conduct a night patrol. A few weeks later, the price of oil almost doubled, and President Bush sent even more the military. The number of troops increased to several 100,000 fighters. 62 days have passed since the arrival of the second platoon. From boredom, they arrange scorpions for money. Sword has shared with us basic rules in order to avoid boredom and loneliness during service. The camp installed the board of shame where the soldiers glue photos of girls and wives who did not wait for them. Swarmo begins to worry about his girlfriend. One day, correspondents come to them. Six conducts a briefing that you can say and what is impossible. You signed a contract. You have no rights, he says. Journalists interview the soldiers. When asked who is waiting for him at home, Suford replies that this is Christina, the only person to him. Six tells correspondents how convenient the chemical protection is. To demonstrate this, he forces the fighters to wear costumes and hold a football match. The infantrymen are trying to play American football despite the hellish heat, but soon, exhausted by Sykes, they arrange a rebellion, taking off all their clothes and swearing with all their might. Six is in a hurry to take journalists away. That night, as a punishment for behavior, Six forces the soldier to build a pyramid from bags of sand and laugh into the whole throat. In the evening, Sunford receives his tokens and complains that they again did not indicate that he was an atheist. He also receives a letter from Christina, who finds out that she met a guy named Carl, a hotel manager where she works. The soldiers make fun of him, saying that Christina will soon be on the board of shame. Kruger encourages Smorford and advises not to draw hasty conclusions. Next week, they will go to the rear, from where he can call her and find out everything. For several days, Scorford is in complete despair, constantly thinking about what is written in a letter. As soon as the opportunity falls out, he calls Christina. The conversation goes normally, but he interrupts it and asks a question about Carl. She says that he is just a friend and pretends to be problems with the connection and puts the phone. This is even more raps in Swarma. Now he dreams of nightmares about Christine. In addition to everything, Datman receives a cassette from his wife and invites to watch her, thinking that this is the film A Deer Hunter. However, on the record is the homemade video of the carnal pleasures of some couple. All infantrymen are delighted with this spectacle, but then the girl turns into the camera and Datman recognizes her wife with a neighbor in her. 3 calms Datman and leads him away, explaining that his wife took revenge on his past betrayals. Some fighters rewind the cassette to enjoy the sight again, but Troy returns and stops them, ordering them to do their own business. The 2nd platoon promotes the desert. On the 122nd day, the number of troops increased to 390,000 people. Swarmo finally focused on Christine and begins to think that he is crazy. In the evening, he enters the tent to the Smarter of Mortals, which serves as a signalman, and for $40 he buys a canister of alcohol from him. He returns to his tent to arrange a party on Christmas Eve. Smorford asks the O'Donnell to replace him with duty for money. The soldiers have fun this evening, but the O'Donnell accidentally arranges a fire, warming up dinner. The fire gets out of control and throws it to the boxes with signal missiles. The soldiers think that the attack began, run out of a tent with weapons and see the culprit. The next morning, half-naked Swapley poured under the scorching sun in front of his platoon. Six lowers it to the ordinary because he left the watch, assigning him to dispose of the waste from street toilets. This work helps him to forget about Christine for a while, but the mystery is clearly dissatisfied with his new duties. In his place, I would hold my face away from this barrel, because caustic gases are allocated, including methane, which can cause loss of consciousness. The next day, Suford and the O'Donnell work out the assembly-disassembly of machine guns. Sunford is still angry with the Adin and admits that he always wanted to know what it was like to kill a person. Then, he charges the machine gun and directs it into the head of the O'Donnell. Cortez leaves the tent, saying that he had not seen anything. Swarmo begins to scream at the Ada head, forcing him to read the arrow oath. Realizing what he had done, Suford begins to cry. During the patrolling of the desert, Troy reports Smorford for the incident with the O'Donnell and makes him apologize, but he is interrupted by sudden shots. Barely distinguishable silhouettes appear on the horizon. The group is built in a row. Sunford welcomes people in Arabic and approaches them for negotiations, but the situation is heating up. The Bedouins inform him that someone had killed their camels and leaves. On the way back, the platoon is having a merrily discussing what happened. It turns out that Fowler shot the camels with boredom, and in colors tells how cool it is when the head of the camel turns from the shot. However, the rest look at him with condemnation, realizing that because of him, they almost shot 9 civilians. Then, Fowler notices a civilian girl in Ferrari passing by and begins to demonstrate her intellectual abilities to her. Sykes informs the 2nd platoon that they are now conducting an Operation Storm in the Desert. Hussein announces the invasion of Iraq and Kuwait, and there will be victims. All fighters are inspired by the upcoming battle. The enemy uses toxic gas, so the fighters give atropine and syringes with injections. All infantrymen should sign a refusal of claims because the drug has not yet passed the test. Kruger refuses to take pills and sign a refusal. Six explains the possible consequences of gas poisoning and forces everyone to sign the papers and take pills. However, when Sykes is turning away, Kruger spits atropine. Later, they begin to dig their sleeping pits. At this moment, American fighters fly over them. 3, realizing that aviation will reach their goals before the infantry begins to complain about the meaninglessness of their work. Sunford is trying to reason his gunner, but Sykes takes Smorford aside and says that Troy will be kicked out of the army as soon as they return to the States because he hid his criminal record from the recruitment. He orders Sunford to keep Troy under control. Suford tells Troy that he could at least tell about it, but Troy advises him not to poke his nose into other people's affairs. In the evening, infantrymen receive mail. Christina returns Smorfo his t-shirt, which he left her. Swarmo is upset, but switches to Troy, who needs support. All the fighters in the tent begin to cheer up Troy, fill it onto the ground, and put the stigma of the Marine Corps. The next day, the 2nd second platoon is under fire of enemy artillery. While everyone is hiding in shelter, Suford is standing, enjoying the beginning of the first battle. 6 commands him to bring batteries for a signalman. He runs through artillery fire, brings batteries that turn out to be discharged. The Iraqis retreat, and the Marine infantrymen advance in their direction. In the distance, they see flying U.S. fighters. Fowler in joy waves them, but 2 fighters suddenly turn around and, having taken the infantrymen for the Iraqis, begin to shell their own. Among the infantry, there are wounded. The second platoon gets to warmed cars, defeated by the same fighters. They take place among charred bodies and understand that there are civilian victims among the victims. One of them finds the body of a little girl. In the same place, they arrange a halt. Sword is unfortunate and realizes the whole essence of what is happening. He tears from what he saw. Iraqis set fire to oil wells. Oil rain begins. 6 commands to dig in, but soon they are forced to change the location due to the shift in the wind. Roya sleeping pits. Sunford notices Fowler, who digs something in the distance. "We are ordered to delve here," he says. Several fighters are suitable and see how Fowler plays with the corpse found. Sword and 3 drag a corpse. 6 approaches Swarms, who is trying to bury the body, and says that upon his return he will force Fowler to score toilets for such antics. Noticing that the fighter is in a depressed state, he says that his brother has a plasterboard business, and he offered him a partnership with a good income. Sykes could live a civilian life, but he loves his work and adds that he could not enjoy the appearance of a flaming oil well anywhere. The next morning, Sykes reports to Sunford and Troy that Lieutenant Colonel Kaczynski requested the best snipers, and he recommended Sunford and Troy. Boys instantly perked up. They are given the task of eliminating 2 high-ranking Iraqi officers in the dispatch tower nearby. He recalls them to request confirmation before the shot. Friends are put forward on a mission. Sunford and 3 hide in an abandoned building with an excellent review on the dispatch tower. They are waiting for a long time while goals appear. 2 officers appear in the evening. The rifle is configured. Troy calls to the headquarters and requests permission to shoot. Having received good, they begin the countdown. Smorford is ready to shoot, but Major Lincoln bursts into the room and interrupts them, reporting the upcoming air attack. Troy begs the major to allow them to make a shot because the outcome will be won. The aviation equals everything with the ground, and no one will know that they shot. The major refuses, and 3 breaks away. They only observe how aviation does its work. Later in the evening, they discuss their plans after returning to the citizen. Troy says he will be a draggler. Looking at the watch, they understand that the car did not come behind them, and they have to get to the camp on foot. Suddenly they hear the noise behind the pass. In the hope that these are Iraqis, they are preparing to fire. Rising, they see that the American military celebrate their victory around the fire. "Why are you so dressed up?" Everything is madly glad that the war is over, but Sufford dejectedly says that he never shot from his rifle. He makes a shot into the air and everyone begins to follow his example. A few days later in the United States, a celebration of the military returning home is undergoing. At that moment, the veteran of Vietnam jumps into the bus and congratulates everyone on the victory. "Thanks for the well-done work." The soldiers in a panic look at him, seeing their future in this homeless, for whom the only joy in life is the imaginary victory of their country in meaningless wars for other people's oil. Sunford comes to Christine and meets on the threshold of Carl. The guy understands that his time was gone. We are shown the civilian life of his comrades. Fowler is having fun in the bar. Kruger found his use on the exchange. Cortez with his wife and 3 children in the park. Escobar lays out goods in a supermarket. And Electrics again on the battlefield. A few months later, the Adel comes to Smord with sad news. Troy died. The entire platoon appeared at the funeral of a comrade. The film ends with the phrase that after serving in the Marine Corps, whatever the man was doing, he built a house, loved his wife, or changed his son a diaper. He always remains a Marine. I also advise you to watch other videos on my channel. Good luck.